Russia was not invited to this meeting. What does it think about it?
So this was a meeting to discuss, it's the fourth meeting in a series to discuss a 10-point peace plan that President Zelensky came up with some time ago. And the Russians have completely rejected this peace plan. One of the provisions in the peace plan would be for Ukraine to have its territorial integrity restored, i.e. for Russian troops to withdraw to where they, not only where they were before February 24th, but before they took over the Donbass in 2014. Now, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, gave an interview at the end of last year where he completely rejected that. And he said Ukraine doesn't have any right to territorial integrity anymore because it violated promises it made when it became an independent country in 1992, i.e. When it said it wanted to be neutral and respect the rights of Russian speakers. So the Russians won't even discuss this plan. And of course, they haven't been invited to any of these meetings.
Okay, so whether it's this plan or another that Russia may actually be able to get on board with, is this now what it is time for? Some kind of negotiated settlement? Or is there still a chance that Ukraine can win this war outright?
So I don't think it's time for a negotiated settlement, because the only thing that the Russians would agree to now, and you heard from Clifford Kupchan that, you know, they're doing somewhat better than they were before. The only thing they would agree to would be for Ukraine to accept the loss of these 4 territories that Russia has annexed, although it doesn't control all of them. Any Ukrainian government that would do that would be out of office anyway, but it's unacceptable because it leaves Ukraine extremely vulnerable. So neither the Ukrainians nor the Russians are interested in real peace talks now. But I think what the Russians are interested in is to begin a process of negotiation that wouldn't lead anywhere, but where they would be seen to be making an effort in the lead run up to Putin's re-election in March.
Of course, we've got a debate on funding here in the U.S. Angela, we've talked about it repeatedly. It hinges on a deal over the border, and there's a chance that this just won't happen. I talked yesterday with Howard Buffett, whose philanthropic effort has brought about $500 million to Ukraine. He told us that the country is fighting more U.S. adversaries than just Russia in this war. Here's what he said.
Ukraine is fighting not just the second most powerful military in the world, but they're also fighting, really by proxy, Iran and North Korea. So Ukraine is fighting 3 of our largest enemies at this point in time. If we withdraw from Ukraine, we have no allies and no friends in the world when we come to having to fight or deal with another conflict.
Angela, that's a very real possibility based on what we're hearing from some in Washington who don't want to see continued support. Do you agree with Buffett's take?
Yeah, I mean, if the support doesn't come through for Ukraine, U.S. support, and then if the European 50 billion euros also doesn't come through because of Hungary blocking it, then Ukraine's ability to keep fighting the Russians will diminish this year. They can't ramp up their own production of weapons that quickly. And if they are defeated by the Russians, you know, the Russia will be emboldened to go further. Maybe to attack another country, not now, but in the near future. And the message that it will send to all of our allies around the world, if we don't continue to support Ukraine, is that they shouldn't trust us, that we're no good as an ally. Plus, it's the precedent of one country invading another country completely unprovoked and taking territory. And that has implications for many countries in the world which have disputed territories.
Well, Angela, that was basically the case that Mr. Buffett was making, this idea that if the U.S. backs away now, then it's going to be on NATO's doorstep before we know it. Do you really think Vladimir Putin would make a move on a NATO country, knowing that alliance has gotten even more fortified and even larger since this conflict began almost 2 years ago?
Well, so far, we know that during this war, the Russians have been pretty careful not to do anything that would make NATO enter this war, although they have violated Polish airspace and Romanian airspace, 2 NATO allies. It's not likely that they would do that now. They certainly might use a victory over Ukraine to attack some other post-Soviet states. Moldova, I think, would come to mind as maybe the first one. But certainly, if you talk to people in the Baltic states, given their experience with Russian and Soviet occupation, they believe that the Russians still have their sights on these three states, which were part of the Soviet Union. So it's not very likely, but you can't rule this out, again, if Russia thinks that it's been victorious and that the West isn't going to stop it.
Angela, getting back to where we started, this secret meeting with Ukraine, G7, some global South countries, why does it need to be secret?
Well, so the first three meetings in these series were public in Copenhagen, in Jeddah, and in Malta. But maybe it's given, the intensity of the war, and they're really trying to figure out, say, with a country like Saudi Arabia, which, of course, has just joined the BRICS and steers very carefully between Russia and other countries in the U.S., maybe they're trying to get the buy-in from some of these global South countries to move forward. But since we don't know what was discussed there, it's just speculation.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, Angela, I'd like to ask you a different question, leaning on the time you have spent in the U.S. government. Of course, you worked in the State Department. You've been involved in other ways as well. The United States Defense Secretary right now is hospitalized. They say that he is doing his work. He has access to the information security communications that he needs. But there was a massive question around communication between defense and the White House and the American public because his condition was not known for some time. We just learned today that it's prostate cancer that he's dealing with. What is your reaction to these revelations?
I think probably there was a misunderstanding of the chain of command here, and obviously the president needed to know about that. There are two major wars going on, Russia, Ukraine, and Israel, Gaza. Of course, Secretary Austin does have a deputy, and she was told that she was in charge there, but probably there was some failure of communication here, and I'm sure that all the relevant people are examining this and figuring out how not to let this happen again.